Captain Evelyn Harper had never felt fear like this before. Stranded alone on an alien planet, with nothing but the clothes on her back and her wits to survive, she had never felt more alive. It was not by choice that she had come to this barren, untamed world. She had been part of a civilian transport ship, a peaceful mission to explore new colonies. But things went wrong. A mercenary ship had attacked their vessel, forcing it into an emergency crash landing. Most of the crew was lost in the wreckage, and Evelyn was the sole survivor. She could barely remember the crash, just flashes of fire and the sound of screaming alarms. When she woke up, she found herself on the surface of an alien planet, surrounded by nothing but dense, thick forest and towering mountains. There was no sign of her ship. No sign of anyone, just endless wilderness stretching out in every direction. At first, Evelyn didn't panic. She was a survivor. Back on Earth, she had trained in extreme environments, learning everything she could about survival. It wasn't enough to be tough. It was about being smart. She knew how to use what was around her. She knew how to find food, build shelter, and stay alive. But as the days passed, she began to wonder just how long she could survive in a place this harsh. The planet seemed alive with dangers. Huge, insect-like creatures stalked the forest floor. Some were carnivores, their jaws designed to crush bones. There were strange storms that came out of nowhere, with winds so strong they could rip a person off their feet. And the air was thick, harder to breathe than the clear skies of Earth. Yet Evelyn carried on. She kept moving, kept searching for food and water, and kept finding ways to keep herself alive. It was the only thing she knew to do. There was no point in despair. Every day she fought to stay alive, and every day she did. What she didn't know, however, was that she wasn't alone. The Zilgar were watching her. The Zilgar were an ancient alien species, known across the galaxy for their unmatched survival skills. They were warriors, conquerors, and explorers. Many believed them to be the most resilient species to ever exist. They had conquered worlds with deadly environments, from planets with freezing temperatures to those where deadly radiation ruled the skies. They had survived it all, and they were proud of it. They had been tracking Evelyn's crash since the moment her ship entered the planet's atmosphere. Their surveillance ships had been monitoring her every move, recording her attempts to survive. To them, Evelyn was nothing more than an experiment, an anomaly. They had never encountered a human before, but their records showed humans were not known for their ability to survive in extreme conditions. The Zilgar believed they were the only ones who could conquer nature in such a brutal way. They assumed the human would perish quickly in the wilderness. And yet, after several days, Evelyn was still alive. The Zilgar, intrigued and somewhat amused, began to grow interested in this human woman. They wanted to see just how long she would last. They were certain that the wilderness would claim her life. They were certain no human could survive here without advanced technology or help. It was their pride that fueled their curiosity. One of the Zilgar's highest commanders, Jara, decided to make a public declaration before the council. He was an older Zilgar, seasoned by countless battles and missions. His experience had led him to believe that the wilderness was a realm that only they had mastered. There was no way a human could survive it. Jara's claim would soon become the center of attention for the entire council of Zilgar. "No one can survive bare in the wilderness," he declared loudly, his voice booming across the council chamber. "The land here is cruel, unforgiving, and deadly. If this human survives for any significant length of time, it will be nothing more than luck, and luck runs out." The council fell silent at his words. Jara was a respected figure among the Zilgar, and his confidence seemed to set the tone for their entire race. His words carried weight. If he said the human would perish, then surely that would be the case. His gaze shifted to the holographic display showing Evelyn's position on the planet's surface. "We will let her continue for a while longer. Let her experience what the wilderness has to offer. She will fall like all the others. Watch closely and you will see." "Her time will come." The council murmured in agreement, though some of the younger Zilgar looked uneasy. They had watched Evelyn's progress closely. She was proving to be far more resilient than they had expected. On the surface, Captain Harper had no idea her every move was being monitored. She didn't care. Survival was all that mattered. Evelyn continued to trek through the alien forest, moving carefully but quickly. She had learned to sense the change in the air just before a storm would hit. She had found water running through a nearby creek, and she had set up a simple shelter using the nearby trees and vines. Each day was a test, but she was growing stronger with every challenge. She found herself thinking back to her life before the crash, to her crew, to Earth, to the peaceful days before everything went wrong. She had no hope of ever getting back home. All she could do now was focus on surviving, and surviving was all she had left. One evening, as she sat near the creek, making a fire to keep the creatures of the night at bay, she saw something in the distance. A strange light flickered in the sky, moving slowly toward her position. At first, she thought it was another storm, but the light didn't move like the usual lightning. It seemed controlled, purposeful. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew this was no ordinary storm. It was something else. The light grew brighter, closer. And soon she realized that it wasn't a storm at all. It was a ship. An alien ship, small and sleek, hovering just above the treetops. The ship moved silently, gliding effortlessly through the sky. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She had been expecting something, though she wasn't sure what. The crash, the strange creatures, the challenges, it had all led to this moment. She felt a rush of anticipation, but also fear. What did this ship mean? Were they here to help? Or had the Zilgur decided it was time to end her survival experiment? As the ship landed, the air around her seemed to grow still, as though the entire world was holding its breath. She stood up slowly, her fingers tight around the crude knife she had fashioned from a broken piece of metal. She didn't know what to expect, but she was ready for whatever came next. And as the hatch of the ship opened, she saw figures stepping out, their shapes vaguely humanoid, their movements deliberate and graceful. Jarrah watched from his position in the council chamber, his eyes narrowing. He had been right all along. The human was not meant for this wilderness. She had survived far longer than expected, but now it seemed that someone else had taken interest in her. The Zilgur could only watch, knowing that the time to test the human's true limits was fast approaching. And Evelyn. She had no choice but to face whatever came next. The figures that stepped out of the ship were not like anything Evelyn had ever seen before. They were tall and lean, with dark, smooth skin that seemed to shimmer under the light of the distant stars. Their features were sharp, their movements deliberate and measured. They moved with an unsettling grace, as if every step was calculated, as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. They did not speak at first, but their eyes studied Evelyn with a mixture of curiosity and coldness. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart racing in her chest. Her mind screamed at her to be cautious. The knife in her hand felt like nothing more than a piece of metal, offering little protection against these alien figures. Yet she refused to show fear. She had survived worse, and she would survive this. The leader of the group, a tall figure with piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. Evelyn instinctively tightened her grip on the knife, but the figure raised a hand, signaling that she should remain calm. "You are the human," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant, carrying an air of authority. "You have been surviving in the wilderness longer than any species would. You should have perished by now." Evelyn narrowed her eyes, her pulse quickening. She didn't trust these aliens. She had no idea who they were or why they were here, but she had learned one thing: never trust anyone, especially when your life is on the line. "I'm Captain Evelyn Harper," she said, her voice steady, though a touch of defiance rang in her tone. "And I'm still here. What do you want?" The figure paused for a moment, studying her with cold, calculating eyes. "We are the Zilgur. We observe species, test them, study their ability to survive in extreme conditions. You have impressed us." Evelyn's grip on the knife loosened, but she didn't let her guard down. "You've been watching me?" "Since the moment your ship entered the atmosphere," the Zilgur leader replied. "We have seen how you adapt, how you endure. You should not be alive. You should be dead like the others before you." "Others?" Evelyn repeated, her voice tinged with curiosity and caution. "You've done this before," the leader nodded slowly. "The wilderness is unforgiving. Many species have come to our world only to fall before it. Only the strongest survive, and yet, you remain." Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling her the whole truth. These aliens weren't here to help. They weren't here to rescue her. They were here to test her, to see if she would break. "I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing," she said, her voice cold now. "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for any of this." The Zilgur leader regarded her silently for a moment. There was a strange glint in his eyes, almost as if he was impressed by her defiance. "No one asked for this," he said finally, "but it is our way. We test the weak and we reward the strong." Evelyn's thoughts raced. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about finding food, shelter, and water. The wilderness had become something more, a test of her very will to live. And these aliens, they were watching, they were waiting, but for what? To see how far she could go, to see if they could break her. Before she could say anything more, the Zilgur leader turned and motioned for the others to follow. Without a word, they began to move toward the ship. Evelyn's heart sank. She wasn't going to be left alone, not this time. She followed them at a distance, keeping her knife ready. She had no idea what they wanted, but she wasn't about to make it easy for them. As they walked, she observed them carefully. Their movements were purposeful, not rushed. They weren't running from anything, they were simply walking as if they had all the time in the world. Soon they arrived at a large clearing, surrounded by thick trees. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of damp earth rising from the ground. Evelyn stood silently, watching as the Zilgur leader gestured for her to stop. They had reached a large, circular structure that seemed to have appeared from nowhere, a massive platform surrounded by strange, glowing symbols. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, eyeing the structure suspiciously. The Zilgur leader didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face her fully. "This is where we test the true strength of a species, where we see if you are worthy of survival." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Her instincts told her to run, to flee from this place, but she forced herself to stay still. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now, not when she had come this far. "Are you ready?" the Zilgur leader asked, his eyes narrowing as he watched her closely. Evelyn's mind raced. She had survived the wilderness. She had outlasted the elements, the wildlife, and everything else this alien world had thrown at her. But this was different. This was something more, and yet she could not back down, not now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. With that, the Zilgur leader raised his hand, and the platform beneath her feet began to hum with energy. Evelyn felt a surge of panic rise in her chest, but she kept herself calm, focusing on the task at hand. She wasn't about to let whatever came next break her. The ground beneath her feet shifted, and suddenly the air around her seemed to warp. A flash of light blinded her, and she found herself standing on a different landscape altogether. The planet had changed. It was as if she had been transported to another world, one far more dangerous than the last. The sky was a sickly yellow, swirling with clouds that seemed to pulse with electricity. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and dry, with jagged rocks jutting out from the earth like broken teeth. In the distance, she could see massive creatures, enormous, lumbering beasts with razor-sharp claws and teeth. She wasn't alone in this new world. The Zilgur had followed her. They stood at a distance, watching her closely, waiting to see what she would do. This was no longer just a wilderness. This was a trial, a test, and Evelyn had no choice but to face it. The first creature she saw was unlike anything she had ever encountered before. It was large, with thick scales covering its body, its eyes glowing a menacing red. It moved with a slow, deliberate pace, its claws scraping against the ground as it approached. Evelyn's mind raced. She couldn't fight this creature head-on, not with her knife. She needed to think, she needed to outsmart it. As the creature drew closer, Evelyn spotted a large boulder nearby. It was just the right size. She sprinted toward it, ducking behind it for cover. The creature growled, its claws scraping the ground as it circled the boulder. Evelyn held her breath, waiting for the right moment. When the creature lunged at the boulder, she dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its massive jaws. As it slammed into the boulder, it became momentarily stunned, giving Evelyn the chance to grab a sharp rock from the ground. She didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, she hurled the rock at the creature's eyes, hitting it squarely. The creature howled in pain and backed away, momentarily disoriented. Evelyn didn't stop to look back. She knew the Zilgur were watching her every move. She had to survive. She had to prove that humans were capable of far more than they ever imagined. As she moved deeper into the alien landscape, the creatures became more frequent, more aggressive. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She used everything she had learned, every ounce of her strength and skill to keep moving forward. The Zilgur continued to watch from a distance, their expressions unreadable. They had underestimated her, but they were beginning to see the truth. The wilderness was unforgiving, but so was she. And as the trials continued, Evelyn Harper proved, time and again, that humanity's will to survive could not be broken. The days on the alien world seemed to blur into one another. Evelyn had fought, survived, and adapted. She had faced countless dangers that would have broken most beings, but she was still standing. Every challenge, every creature, every test set before her, she had faced head-on, unwilling to let anything or anyone defeat her. As she moved deeper into this alien landscape, she began to notice a strange shift. The air felt heavier, the sky darker, as if something more was at play. The creatures she had been battling grew more aggressive, more relentless. They weren't just testing her anymore, they were hunting her. And the Zilgur, watching from afar, seemed to take a more active interest in her. Evelyn could feel their presence now. They had stopped hiding, no longer observing from a distance. She didn't know when it had happened, but she realized they were no longer just watching her. They were waiting for her to fail. Her heart raced as she ducked behind a rock, peering over its edge. A massive, armored creature, like something out of a nightmare, lumbered toward her. Its skin was thick and impervious to most of the weapons she had at her disposal. But she had learned long ago that brute strength wouldn't win here. It was about strategy. She tightened her grip on the knife she had made, knowing that it was the only tool she had left that might work against this beast. But before she could act, a strange noise filled the air, a sharp, screeching sound that echoed across the barren landscape. The beast stopped, its head jerking toward the source of the sound. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. The Zilgur were doing something. They weren't just watching anymore, they were manipulating the environment, perhaps even pushing the creatures to attack her. Before she could react, the ground beneath her feet began to shift. A loud rumble filled the air and the earth cracked open. Evelyn barely had time to jump out of the way as a massive chasm opened up beneath her, swallowing part of the ground. The creature roared in surprise and turned, but it was too late. The chasm was widening, and the beast began to fall into it, its screams fading as it disappeared into the darkness. Evelyn didn't have time to celebrate her small victory. The Zilgur were toying with her, using their advanced technology to change the landscape and test her ability to survive. But she refused to let that break her. She had come this far, and she would keep going. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fail. The rest of the day passed in a blur of evasion and quick thinking. Evelyn had learned to move quietly, to blend into the environment. The Zilgur had made the wilderness more dangerous, but she had become even more dangerous in return. She knew that they were watching her, that they were waiting for her to make a mistake, but she wasn't going to give them that chance. Night fell, and the landscape shifted again. The stars above seemed to pulse, as if in rhythm with the beat of her heart. She had no idea what the Zilgur were planning, but one thing was clear: they were testing her endurance, and they weren't going to stop until they saw her broken. But Evelyn wasn't going to let that happen. As the night deepened, she began to feel a strange sense of clarity. It was almost as if she had become one with the world around her. She could sense the creatures lurking in the darkness, feel the subtle shifts in the wind. The wilderness had become her home. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. In the distance, she saw the glow of the Zilgur's ship. They were waiting, no longer content to remain hidden. It was time for the final test. Evelyn knew this was coming. She had always known it. She moved toward the ship, her steps sure and confident. The Zilgur were no longer a threat. They had underestimated her at every turn, assuming that their technology and their superior knowledge of survival would be enough to break her. But they hadn't counted on one thing: the strength of a human spirit. As she approached the ship, she saw the Zilgur leader waiting for her. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something else there now, a flicker of respect. "You've come far," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Longer than we expected. Longer than anyone should be able to survive here." Evelyn met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm still here, and I'll keep going as long as I have to." The Zilgur leader nodded slowly. "You've proven something to us, something we didn't expect. You are stronger than we thought, but the wilderness is not the only test." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The Zilgur leader stepped aside, revealing a massive device behind him. It looked like a giant metallic sphere with strange, glowing symbols etched into its surface. "This is the final trial," the leader said. "You will face the ultimate test of survival. If you succeed, you will be allowed to leave this world. If you fail, you will not survive." Evelyn's mind raced. This was it, the final challenge. But she had come too far to turn back now. She had survived everything they had thrown at her, and she would survive this too. The device hummed to life, its glowing symbols pulsating as the ground beneath Evelyn's feet trembled. A door opened, and a swarm of mechanical creatures poured out, their glowing red eyes fixed on her. These were no ordinary creatures. They were the Zilgur's creations, designed to kill, and they were coming for her. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She lunged toward the nearest creature, grabbing a piece of debris from the ground and using it as a weapon. The creature snarled, its metal claws slashing through the air, but Evelyn was faster. She ducked beneath its attack, using her makeshift weapon to strike at its vulnerable underbelly. The creature screeched and fell, sparking as it hit the ground. The others didn't stop. They kept coming one after the other, each more dangerous than the last. But Evelyn fought with everything she had. She used her surroundings, her wits, and her strength to take down every creature that came her way. Her body was bruised and battered, but she didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. The Zilgur watched from a distance, their expressions unreadable. They had expected her to fall. They had expected her to break, but she hadn't. She was still standing. As the last of the mechanical creatures fell, Evelyn stood tall, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She was covered in dirt, her clothes torn, but she had done it. She had survived. The Zilgur leader stepped forward, his expression shifting. For the first time since their meeting, there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "You have proven yourself, human," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You are stronger than we thought. You have passed the final test." Evelyn didn't say anything at first. She was too tired, too worn out, but the words she had been waiting for finally came. "You are free to leave this world." The Zilgur turned and signaled to his crew. The ship hummed to life, the hatch opening in front of her. As she stepped forward, she took one last look at the planet that had tested her at every turn. It had almost broken her, but she had endured. She had proven that humanity was stronger than anyone could imagine. And as she climbed aboard the ship, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. Because no matter where she went, she would always carry the strength of this world with her.